I grew up in Humboldt Park in the city of Chicago. And I saw my immigrant parents work really long hours, the minimum wage jobs. My dad worked 2 jobs, my mom worked 2 jobs, and somehow she also managed to give a lot of time to her local church. What they couldn't afford was childcare. My dad worked my mother worked first shift, so my dad can work third shift, and they can figure out how to make sure that their kids always had someone at home. And that meant that my parents could barely ever see each other. My parents' experience is not very different from the reality of so many others right now. And look, I witnessed the struggles of my community to secure stable housing, to ensure quality education for their children, and to raise a family with a rising cost of living. But let me be very clear. Working people are still struggling. The cost of living in America, well, let's just say, we say it, right? It's too damn high. Too often I hear my constituents, my neighbors talk about having to make a decision. Can I go to the grocery store and buy the eggs and buy the milk, try to get some spinach, try to get the bread, pay the $2,200 a month for a 2-bedroom apartment in Chicago, and then afford my inhaler? And Congressman, oftentimes what ends up happening is that people have to choose between being able to feed their children and their health care. Feeding their children and an inhaler. In one of the most richest countries in the whole world. Why is it so hard for us to move a working people's agenda in Congress? Like, you would think there's more of us that come from working class than ever before. Some of us actually understand what it's like to have to help our parents who are probably making $100 too much for Medicaid, so they need help covering their health care. Like, there are more of us here who are working class. But somehow, a working people's agenda in this place doesn't seem to be a priority. We ask ourselves, why doesn't the American people trust that we're working for them? Well, let me answer that question. When unchecked corporate power and greed in the marketplace meet unchecked corporate money in politics, well, we have a problem. And it's families in Illinois 3, 4, 5, your own district, who end up suffering because of it. We know that price gouging, price fixing, predatory algorithms, and corporate monopolies put profits and production over people. And it's why I joined my colleagues in sending a letter that Congresswoman Jayapal was just talking about around opposing the Kroger-Albertson merger. Because we have to resist the consolidation of corporate power if we're gonna protect working people. I'm also a proud co-sponsor of Congresswoman Omar's Shrinkflation Reduction Act, which would enhance price transparency for consumers and combat the deceptive practice of shrinkflation. Look, I go to my local grocery store, and I can literally see the difference between what people in my community are paying and what someone else in a community that has 4 grocery stores pays. They usually pay 25% more. We need the kind of accountability that bills like this will bring. Shrinkflation practices hide behind the language of inflation, but we know that actually consumer exploitation is intended to defraud us, that corporations can continue to profit while providing less product. And listen, we know how corporations are able to get away with these practices. It's because they use their profits to buy the same exact people who are responsible for holding them accountable. Yeah, I said it. Big money in politics, whether poured into elections or directly in the pockets of corrupt public servants, gives special interests in corporations outsized influence in our democracy. So when a good bill comes before us, when a good bill comes to the committee, somehow we can't actually debate the bill. Because it's a good bill, it should pass. But these corporations have the power to buy elections and buy elected officials. And look, our democracy is weaker and our communities suffer when the voices of working families are buried under the influence that millions can buy. We see it too often. It's why we need bills like H.R. 1118, 1118, the Disclose Act, to end the scourge of dark money buying our democracy. And it's why I'm a proud co-sponsor of the act that Rep. Pappas has introduced, because it does a couple things. It requires super PACs and dark money groups to disclose donors who've given $10,000 or more during an election cycle. It requires those spending money on ads to disclose their donors. And it cracks down on the use of shell corporations to hide the identity of a donor. If you are donating to an elected official or candidate, the public should know who you are. And the Disclose Act bill does just that. Because look, if our democracy is not for sale, which it shouldn't be for sale, then mega donors should not be attempting to buy our democracy. And it means we have to bring the full power of the federal government through regulation, through accountability, and through transparency to fight for working people, for our constituents. And it's also why I think it's so important that we're co-sponsoring legislation like Congresswoman Jayapal's bill, which is the Stop Corporate Capture Act, HR 1507. It institutes reforms to right-size the influence of corporate interests over a regulatory process. It increases transparency of government rulemaking decisions, and it establishes a mechanism for the public to hold agencies accountable. We have to do everything possible so that the American people trust that those of us that are in the people's house are actually here for them. Because the reality is that they don't. They do see us as people who are here to enrich ourselves. People are here to hear ourselves speak. Working families demand accountability, and they have given us a mandate. They're asking us for bold solutions to economic justice, and it means taking on corporate greed. As we get closer to an administration that has promised to weaken the pillars of our democracy more than ever, I think it's going to be critical that progressives, but every Democrat, frankly, every elected official that's here for working families, get together to unite and address corporate greed. Because if we don't, we'll continue to see what we see now. Corporations becoming wealthier than wealthy can possibly be, while poor people continue to have to choose between healthcare and feeding their children. Congressman DeLuzio, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today, and thank you for bringing up such an important, critical issue that I look forward to working with you in the next Congress. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I thank the gentlelady from Illinois for her powerful words. This democracy is not for sale, and that should not be something that's controversial in this chamber or anywhere else. Our constituents expect us to fight for all of them. One of the places that we've seen this consolidation, this concentration, this raw power really hurt folks, agriculture. We see it because we know that food production is a key step in that grocery supply chain that we know we hear from our constituents about costs being too high. We're all paying more, too much, for food because of this consolidation that we see in agriculture. Folks are getting ripped off. They're tired of it.